Yarning about hearing.
My 4-year-old son came in for his needles at the clinic I was working in, and it just happened to be that the doctor looked in his ears and found that he had both of his ears were ready to perforate. The bulging, pussy eardrums, and I was actually quite shocked that and I suppose a little bit embarrassed too that I'm a health worker and how come my son's suffering this and I didn't know anything about it, and I asked him, you all right? How come you didn't tell me? Is there any pain? And he said to me, oh, there's a little bit, but it wasn't enough to stop him being a normal little boy. As I said, he got grommets, and for 12 months, pus was pouring out of his ears, blowflies, being called up to the school to come and get him because blowflies are flying around his ears. It's embarrassing, and here he is 20-something years later, and I'm still embarrassed to say, oh my God, shame. My son went to school with all this pus coming out of his ears and green pus and yellow pus. It's not like it got a cold or a flu or a chest infection and you're on antibiotics for 2 weeks and then you're good. It doesn't happen that way. It just keeps coming back and coming back and coming back.
So my hearing loss was picked up when I was around 8 years old, and I had tonsils and adenoids taken out and grommets put in. My parents and my teachers would mistaken my not answering them or reacting to them as me ignoring them or just deliberately not listening. On some occasions that would actually result in me getting a smack up the side of the head for not listening or for ignoring and not doing jobs that I'd been asked purely because I wasn't aware that I'd been asked something because I didn't hear it.
One of the key things I say to families, and it has to be said, is that it's not your fault. Mum and Dad, it's not your fault. Little one, it's not your fault. I mean, it's our fault if we don't look after it. It's our fault if we don't take our child to the clinic and get the checkups that we're supposed to. But the disease itself, it's not our fault. It wasn't my fault my son had pus pouring out of his ears. It wasn't my fault that, my other son had a condition that was never diagnosed until the impact had happened. It wasn't my kids' fault that they feel the way that they feel because of their lack of hearing or learning at the appropriate ages. But medicine and that makes it feel like it's our fault. And I suppose one of the things I see with families is when I tell them that it's not your fault, this child behaves this way. And they're like, true, so they're not naughty kids. No, they're not naughty kids. They just didn't hear you. And you see the relief of families. You see wow, they're already feeling the stress of, I must be a bad parent, my kid's not listening to me, they're not doing it, they're not doing as they're told, they're running away from school. And you wear it as a parent too. So when you're able to say, look, it's not your fault. The child's not naughty because of this, this and this. They just didn't hear you. It's a relief. There's nothing to be ashamed of. I suppose if anything's to be ashamed, if anyone wants to hold shame to it, I suppose it's society that should be ashamed. They should hang their heads because we've got people that don't look for the disease. We've got understandings, miscommunications. We assume things because a child's behaving this way or whatever, that there must be problems at home or mum and dad are no good. The shame I felt with going up to the school to get my son and having everyone's eyes looking at me and making me feel so small. That's where I think the shame belongs. It's in a society setting, and to rid that shame is the education and understanding.
You also get very frustrated as a parent with the school system because their hearing problems become what's seen as behavioural problems. Then you're having to try and explain to school education staff, you know, what's happening with your son, but the school expects you to, you know, be a parent to your child and to discipline your child, and your child expects you to protect them from the school and stick up for them, and it's very hard. It's meant a lot of big changes for me as a mum, me as an employee, me as having a parent going to the school, things like that. It sort of goes back to a little bit like I said before, that in some ways you do have a little bit of guilt because there's only so much that you can handle, and you start to feel guilty because you get frustrated, you don't have enough time to explain something to the child or whatever.
I've got 2 children. Both have had ear disease in different forms. One was diagnosed, one was a late diagnosis, but I've seen the impact on their behaviour. I see the impact on their lack of concentration. One of the older one can't seem to hold down a job, has a lot of mental health, depression issues with himself, and the baby, which is the younger one, he has that same thing, and it really gets me, because when my youngest was 12 years old, and he couldn't, just couldn't understand what was going on with him, and to come and say, Mum, I'm dumb and I'm stupid, I must, I should be dead, I shouldn't be alive. To have a 12-year-old come to you at that stage, it's scary. And all this had made me start wondering what could have gone right or wrong. But as I said, I've got 2 children that have had ear disease. All up I've got 4. The other 2 have never suffered ear disease in the slightest. And you can see the difference. They've both got, one's got 2 university degrees. He's a teacher. The other one completed year 12 as well as hold down a part-time apprenticeship. And when he finished year 12, he walked straight into a job. And I've got 2 others that are going to constantly need that type of support and encouragement. When I think now of the embarrassment and the shame, it makes me want to try harder to say that no other Indigenous mother, auntie, sister, grandmother, no other Indigenous person ever has to go through that shame, that feeling that you're not a good enough parent, seeing the looks in these people's eyes and knowing that they're condemning me as an unfit mother. Maybe they weren't. But that's what I felt. I mean, this disease had an impact on my kids, but it also had an impact on me.